take around 50 to 55 minutes to get through all the content that we have, because there is quite a lot for us to talk about here. And it's probably worth us mentioning that there is an expectation that it isn't just today. We're going to be following up with everybody on this session and potentially arranging some time specific with you one-on-one to understand how we're going to move forward. So don't think that you have to cram everything in the hour. We're going to definitely follow up with everyone here, as well as the people who haven't been able to attend. So what we're going to talk about today, I've got an agenda that we're going to go through. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the strengths-based approach. So it's going to probably going over some old ground for a lot of you, especially if you're quite experienced using Strengthscope and the tools already. But it's important to introduce this, even for those, because there may be potentially some people on the session who haven't really come across it before. So it's kind of framing the strengths-based approach and talking a little bit about that. What we'll then go on to do is talk a little bit more about the background to StrengthscopeLeader in particular. So building on from the strengths-based approach and Strengthscope, we look at why we thought we made the decision to develop a leadership profiler, and talk a little bit more about the background there. Then, again, the real meat of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to actually look at the StrengthscopeLeader profile itself. We're going to start showing you how that differs from Strengthscope standard, and talk about some of the values and some of the reasons that we really feel that you're going to really be excited about what this profile represents. Then we're going to talk about some of the applications of the tool. So again, what this really means is that the profile itself, or the questionnaire itself, is very much the beginning of the journey. Where you're going to see the true value, where you're going to get an awful lot out of it, is how you use that tool, and we'll sort of talk a little bit more about how you do that. And then we'll finish off talking about the resources that we have available to you as potential users of the profiler. It's not just the tool itself. There's an awful lot of support and materials that you can use to wrap around the StrengthscopeLeader profiler itself, which will ensure that you're really comfortable in terms of actually putting this into practice, and that's what we'll finish on. Again, if there's any specific questions, use the profile, use the chat box. But this will be the fourth webinar, and what we found is that we struggle for time if we stop and chat about it too much. So we do need to sort of crack on. So that's what we're going to cover. Interrupt us using the chat box, and we'll come back to it when we get a chance. But hope that's the expectations for everyone here. So we'll start off by looking at the strengths-based approach, and this underpins everything that we do here at Strengths Partnership, and underpins everything that Strengthscope represents. So for those who aren't aware, the strengths-based approach is based on this concept of strengths, and what we mean by strengths are qualities that energize us and that we have potential to be great at. So again, it's really important to define what we mean by strengths, because some people, or there's the preconception that strengths are things that you are good at and that you excel at. What we mean are, when we talk about strengths, are things that energize you and motivate you, and if you're doing those kind of activities, you're feeling in flow and you're motivated and happy. So when we're building on from that, a strengths-based approach to organisational development, therefore, will really have great links to things like concepts such as engagement and leadership, in terms of, which is what we're talking about today. And the output typically is that you create a happy, high-performing workforce, because you're tapping into things that fundamentally motivate your people. By definition, if you're doing activities like that, you are going to be happier, you're going to be more motivated and engaged. And this is a means to link that, to link an understanding of what those strengths are to actually creating the outputs like that, which I'm sure many organisations, that this is high on their agenda. Final 2 points on that build on what we were just talking about. So the concept of loyalty flows from this idea of, if you're an organisation developing people's strengths and looking at that concept, not only are your internal staff going to be more loyal because they're feeling more intertwined with their specific job, but the customers that you have as well will become more loyal to you, given the quality of service and the type of people that tend to be represented by a company like that. And then you're going to get lasting value, because ultimately the people that the whole community and the whole kind of culture of that workplace will be one of engagement, will be one of motivation and energy, rather than pushing water uphill and that kind of concept. Any questions so far? Danielle, do you want to add anything like that?
I think you've covered it all.
So that's, again, in terms of a very brief overview of what the strengths-based approach is. I think that slide's quite powerful in terms of the outputs and the things that we tend to create, but also that definition, which is really important for us to sort of highlight. Building on from that, what the strengths-based approach does is it refocuses the sort of deficit or competency-based weakness model. So looking at really what focuses, what energizes and strengthens people. So again, it's sort of shifting that focus and tweaking that lens to looking at strengths rather than deficits. And again, it's a really positive sort of whole idea. So it's got some great links to sort of positive psychology and that and everything like that. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't deny that people have weakness. So what we're not saying is that everybody is strong at everything. We're not denying that people have areas where they're not particularly strong at or they're not particularly motivated by. So it's a very practical, realistic approach. While still being based in positive psychology, it does have a real link to pragmatism and the reality of what the world is like today. So again, it covers both those sort of angles really well. Second point there, and again, it's really important to highlight this, I feel, when we're talking about Strengthscope, which is the profiling tool that we've developed, is that there's an acceptance that what motivates and energizes and what an individual strengths profile is doesn't fundamentally change over time. What we mean by that is the things that motivate and get you excited, such as something like creativity or courage, that's going to stay with you whether you're in your first role or whether you're at CEO level with 30 years of experience behind you. And again, this is backed up by the psychometric properties of the tool itself. And again, this is really important to flag up, because what we're not with Strengthscope, we're not highlighting some areas where you can potentially develop and change. We're just giving you a kind of mirror to show what the areas of energy you have are, so we can start strategizing and making sure that we're focusing on that, not necessarily focusing on the things that don't motivate you by. Building on from that is the third point that we've got on this slide, which is there's an assumption within strengths-based approaches that people get to the end goal, get to their point of success in different ways. So depending on what strengths and what motivates and energizes you will influence how you get to an end point, even if that end point is exactly the same. So this has got some real synergies with something like MBTI, which looks at the behavior types. But with strengths, what we're understanding is that depending on what your profile is, what kind of things specifically energize you by, will influence how you go about tasks. But as long as we've got an awareness of that, we can still ultimately get the same kind of results, the same positive results. But I'm sure there's an awful lot more we can delve into in that specific area. But that's important for us to know. And then finally, there's evidence, again, it's linking back to this practical nature of the tool. There's an awful lot of evidence available that we can share with you following this session if it's something that you'd be interested in, that an approach like this does produce fundamentally better results for an organization. Again, everything we're talking about is in the context of business, but there's an awful lot of evidence that points to the fact that if you do adopt an approach like this, you're going to create more higher performing workplaces. So those two slides, I think, are there just to kind of intro everything that we're going to be sort of basing, not only StrengthscopeLeader, but everything that we do here at Strengths Partnership. So the suite of psychometric tools that we have, including Strengthscope Team, a Strengths Engagement Index, which is a kind of before and after test of engagement for a workforce, as well as standard Strengthscope tools. All are based on this kind of theory. So yeah, anything? No? No? Any questions? It's all very quiet. It's a bit eerie when you're doing a presentation like this because you can't see what people are thinking, but anyway. building on, and again the final point of this part is this the strength service profit chain, which links back to the concept that I was talking about, which is the practical evidence pointing to this approach being linked to improvement in performance and loyalty and results. And again, if you follow that chain up, it links the idea of improving and optimizing an employee's strengths will improve their engagement, which will in turn link to their customer service capability, so they're more likely to deliver great customer service, which fundamentally links back to the performance of that business. So there's a really quick snapshot for you to be able to justify the ROI or the business case of even thinking about the strengths approach, and that slide's really powerful at doing that. So again, we'll share that with you if you've never seen it before, but again, a lot of this will be covered or known already by people within the room. We'll go on there. So that's the strengths approach, and again, a lot of that might be very clear and very well known by people, maybe not for others, but it's important for us to frame the whole thing regarding what we fundamentally stand for, and that is that focusing on strengths. So why did we then think, well, we've got Strengthscope as a tool, why did we feel the need to develop a specific leadership profiler? And this is kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about in this section here. So we're going to talk about the background. So when you look at StrengthscopeLeader, it's important to flag it that it very much builds on the work that we've already done with Strengthscope, Strengthscope 360, and potentially Strengthscope Team. We're not starting afresh. It's a natural progression, looking at someone's strengths and how you can specifically apply that to leadership behaviours and outcomes. In a similar way to that, we've looked at teams. So again, Strengthscope Team builds on the strengths profile, but looks at the behaviours of a peak performing team. We're almost taking the same structure and applying that to leadership behaviours. So that's fundamentally what it is. The second point now is it's actually the world's first. There are no other strength-based leadership 360 profilers out there. So we're really excited to be able to say we're the first ones who are able to do that. And we know, because obviously we're very close to the other competition out there, and that's something that we're a first in the market for that. And we genuinely believe there's a niche that we're addressing, and there's going to be some real uptake on this. The third point is that we were keen to do something that measures the strengths, of course. Obviously, that's what the Strengthscope tool does, but underpins the strengths profile with observable management behaviours and outcomes. I say management leadership behaviours and outcomes. It's important for us to distinguish between the two, and that's what it does. It provides that link between the strengths profile that you get through Strengthscope with tangible behaviours that a great strengths-based leader would need to be able to exude, and also outcomes that they'll be looking to achieve. And it links those three concepts together really, really well. And you'll see more about that when we look at the profiler itself. And then finally, what we were also keen to do is, as well as develop the actual psychometric tool itself, we were keen to develop a comprehensive and customizable leadership excellence program. And what we mean by that is that there's some off-the-shelf training workshops that we've developed that really help you harness the value of a tool like StrengthscopeLeader and apply it in specific ways. So we've got a strength accelerator, which helps you understand how to use StrengthscopeLeader to develop strength-based excellence within the leadership team. We've also got performance management workshops, so engage in performance dialogues, which really harnesses the strengths approach by leaders who are delivering those kind of performance-type conversations. And there are a number of other courses that we've got available which really build on the work that we're doing as part of this profiler. And again, we'll send some more information about that at the end of the session. So yeah, that's the background. And this slide talks about why we even thought about going down this route. So again, the first point there is the reason we thought that we need to address the leadership community is that first point sort of sums it up really well. Is that when the leaders know and build on strengths, when leaders within the business have an understanding of the strengths-based approach, it's much easier for that organisation to go down that route to change, to make a cultural change towards this way of thinking. So for us to have a tool that's specifically focused on the leadership community was going to help us do that. So there's evidence, obviously, that shows performance does improve, but StrengthscopeLeader help us do that even more, in a much more quicker way. The second point, and again, is really important when we've been talking about on this in previous sessions, is this concept of authenticity. So having that point that we referenced earlier, which is this idea that the strengths approach doesn't have an assumption that everyone's strong in everything. It does understand that there are areas that you're not particularly motivated by, energized by, or excited by. If a leader is able to demonstrate an awareness of that, not only the things that strengthens and energizes him or her, but also the things that are non-strengths or low on their scores, they're going to show it's going to be a real, authentic view of themselves, and it will be far easier for staff to buy into the authenticity of that individual. So Strengthscope and the Strengths approach, and StrengthscopeLeader specifically, will help engender a sense of authenticity in the leadership community. And we're really excited about that, and that's one of the reasons why we thought StrengthscopeLeader would be a great thing to sort of start trying to develop. Again, building on that is the final 2 points here. So this concept that if a leader understands the links between their strengths and behaviours and outcomes, as what is described within the StrengthscopeLeader profile, that concept is going to be able to filter down much easier to the rest of the business. And again, that's a key point. And then finally, so it empowers the leaders to reduce the impact of weaker areas. So again, it's this concept of awareness. The tool, the profile, provides the leadership and an organisational community with an awareness of where their strengths lie. So it empowers them to either to use them more, but it also gives an awareness of the areas that aren't so well developed and well high on their sort of energy scale. And if you've got an awareness of what they are, you can start putting strategies in place to address those kind of weaker areas, or potentially overdoing strengths as well. So that's kind of what the leadership profiler, why we kind of thought about going down that route. Any thoughts on that, Danielle? Again, I know Michelle's had a question there.
No, I think you've covered it pretty comprehensively, Patrick. I'm just having a look at Michelle's question over there about authenticity.
So why do you limit the concept of authenticity with skills? Is it all linked to their strengths, behaviours, etc.? Again, this is probably definitely a conversation worth picking up online, but just to go back to this concept of authenticity and where we've had discussions around this idea on previous sessions, the fundamental thing to remember when we're talking about authenticity and the strengths approach links back to that assumption that we have, which is that within the strengths-based approach, regardless of where you are in your career, you're going to have certain things that energize you more than others. Even if you are a leader or you're on the first rung of your career, and if a leader is able to demonstrate to the rest of the business that that's what they're thinking, it's a realistic approach. It's a approach that's easily relatable to by the whole community within the business, and it helps generate that culture of authenticity because that's something that the leader's putting forward. It isn't just linked to the strengths. It can be obviously looked, you can be more authentic with behaviours and skills and all that kind of thing. But where strengths really can help develop authenticity within the leader is just through that awareness and that assumption that we have, which is that you will have your significant 7, and regardless of who you are, you will have them, which also means that you will have areas that you aren't so excited and motivated by. I hope that's okay, Michelle. Of course, we'll pick this up away from the session, but I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into what we're talking about there. Let me proceed. So again, building on what we talked about before, so when we were developing the tool, and again, it's good having Danielle here, there were some assumptions that we had about great leaders that we have incorporated in the development of StrengthscopeLeader as a tool, but also throughout the whole end-to-end suite of services that we're able to provide our clients. And these are the assumptions that we've got. The first one is that a great leader will identify and build mastery around a narrow range of unique strengths and are not well-rounded. So this is a really key point for you to remember when you're talking about the strength approach to great leadership. What we're not trying to do is make a leader have strong on every single one of the 24 strengths. We fundamentally don't believe that's the case. We believe that a leader, as with anybody, will have some a significant 7 strengths that we can really focus on, that we want to build mastery in those strengths. So let's make that leader really focusing on what that leader really is strengthened and energized and motivated by. And let's also have an awareness that there are areas where he won't be motivated and energized by. And a great leader will have an awareness of both. So they're not well-rounded. We're not going for this kind of master of jack-of-all-trades kind of model. Second point, a great leader will focus on learning and improving developable habits. So they'll, once they've got an understanding of those key strengths and things that energize them, they'll look about how to develop their specific behaviors and habits to improve their performance. And again, that's what a great leader will do. So they'll always be looking to learn, always be looking to develop. And again, Strengthscope Leader can potentially fundamentally help with that. And again, building on the first point, a great leader will bring in others who complement them to achieve success. A Strengthscope Leader or the Strengthscope suite of tools is a great mechanism to understand what others they could potentially bring in. Because you'll be able to see what areas of strength an individual has, you'll also be able to see what areas of non-strength an individual has. So you'll be able to potentially look for people who've got complementary strengths to really help you plug those gaps that you're not able to potentially be as effective as addressing. And that's, again, a great leader will be able to do that. And without a tool like Strengthscope Leader, it's more challenging, to say the least. And then, again, building on from this kind of communal idea of a great leader, the leader will achieve greatness through optimizing the strengths of their followers. So this builds on this concept of a great leader. If a leader is able to understand the strengths approach and what value it can bring to them as a leader and as an individual, they'll be able very much be able to sort of trickle that down to the rest of the business, so that their followers will be able to also have an awareness of their own strengths and be able to build on what makes them great. And that's how they're going to create their great success. They're not going to do it all themselves. They're going to really harness the strengths and skills and unique talents of the people that are following them. So that's the assumptions that we have. I hope that all makes sense. Any questions, or anyone got anything they want to say? Or are you all going to be quiet once again? No, is anything, Danielle? No.
We've covered it all.
Oh dear. I was a bit worrying on that side. Anyway, I will continue. Thanks, Anne. I need those kind of positive reinforcement. That's brilliant. But yeah, let me continue. So again, the final point we're making in this section, when we're talking about the sort of context around Strengthscope Leader, is this slide. And again, it just kind of brings it together. So what we're saying is Strengthscope Leader is designed to help leaders develop vital skills and behaviours that enable them to optimize their strengths. So again, this runs through everything that we're doing. But it allows them to understand what their strengths are and kind of tweak them so they're getting the best out of what they have. Also, obviously, have that awareness that there are going to be some areas of non-strength, and by non-strength, basically things that you're not happy or excited when you're having to do them. They could potentially be risk areas. So it gives you some awareness of what they might be and how you can go about addressing them. And then we talk about what that leader can do to motivate their staff to actually go above and beyond as well. So again, this ties back to the sort of harnessing the strengths of the followers. That's kind of what we're talking about there. And ultimately, they're going to improve the results. Strengthscope Leaders, we're not just holding up a mirror and saying this is what you're about. We're actually going to give you some really great insights around how you can actually improve some key management and leadership outcomes. And again, that's really, really important to us. So that kind of sums it all up. You're all excited to actually see what it's all about now. The idea of that's kind of sort of over at 12:30 now. 12:32. We're going to now actually talk about what Strengthscope Leader fundamentally is. pardon me, but doing a lot of talking, but there you go. So what we're going to do, what I'm not going to do at this stage is go through the Strengthscope Leader report page by page. I'm not a consultant. I'm not able to deliver that kind of detail. But for those of you interested in going and really zeroing in on the detail of each page, we are going to provide a recorded resource that is basically James Brooke, who has developed and co-authored the actual tool itself, is going to run through the tool, the sample report page by page, giving you some really detailed analysis and understanding of what that all means. So you're going to get that. That's not quite ready. We're expecting that to be ready sometime over the next couple of weeks, and I'll make sure you all get that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start framing what the actual tool itself looks like, why it's different to Strengthscope Standard, and some really cool features that we've got in there as well. This is new to Danielle as well, so she's excited also. So how does the profiler work? Again, forgive me, this is potentially a bit basic, but I really like to start from the kind of foundations when we're talking about a tool like this. So how does it work? So the idea is a leader will complete Strengthscope Leader. Sounds pretty obvious. There's a nice little animation that demonstrates that. But this tool is not a self-assessment, so you're not able to go on at that point. In fact, we won't actually give you your report at that stage. To actually complete the report, you need to have input from your raters or that brings in the 360 elements. So the report will not be completed until you've got that input from others. So again, this is really important when we're talking about how you potentially apply this tool. And when we're talking about things like recruitment, Strengthscope Standard, it does have a self-assessment element, and it is quite often used in selection purposes because you're not having to go and get feedback from others at that stage. But Strengthscope Lead is very much a 360, and you'll see why when we're talking about it. Some of the more detailed stuff later on. But once you get to that point, again, the purpose of this slide is to illustrate that that's not where you get the value. We're not done there. You don't just give the report to the leader and say, there you go, that's going to be the panacea to fix all your engagement issues. Let me just stop for a second. So, good question from Patrick. Great name as well, I say. So maybe I can pass over to Danielle. He's asking about how many raters and all that kind of thing.
Yes. So Patrick, the maximum number of raters is 18. And you'll see that's quite different to the Strengthscope 360, which has a maximum of 8. The minimum number, you do need at least 1, as Patrick's mentioned. It is a 360-based profile. Obviously, more than 1 would be ideal. And our thinking around that is that no leader operates in isolation. Mm-hmm. We always have people around him. So we really encourage as many raters as possible. You can physically download the report with 1, but obviously to get the most out of the profile, you want to have a good selection of nominees.
I think building on that point, if you are having that question about the minimum, is this tool the right tool for you, would be my pushback. There's a great self-assessment tool that we have, which is Strengthscope, and it might be worth just looking at that. But again, that's something that we can pick up beyond this session. But the point I was just trying to make on this slide very much is that the tool, that the profile itself is not where you're going to get the value out of the tool. The way you're going to get the value out of the tool is by how you're applying it. And this slide shows you some of the ideas that we've got and how we've used a tool like Strengthscope Leader to really deliver some great value into our customers. So the first one we're talking about there is a debrief. So again, we really will be asking the question of if you're buying a Strengthscope Leader tool off us, who's going to be interpreting that for that person? Because as with any 360, there's going to be some sensitive information in there. There's going to be some potentially hard-hitting analysis and feedback for that particular leader. And we really we feel that if that leader potentially is interpreting that without somebody who's able to support them through that process, it's going to have some potentially negative impacts. So we really would almost insist on the fact that there's going to be a debrief of sorts taking place, and that normally takes place over sort of a 90-minute to 2-hour session. Building on that, you're able, should you want to use the tool to get even more insights, you can build on from that debrief session to actually deliver some coaching and almost potentially go through a coaching program using StrengthscopeLeader very much at the base or the heart of that. And that's a great way of applying the tool itself. In addition to that, quite often it's used as part of a leadership development program as well. So as with a lot of the leadership development, they'll have some sort of psychometric or profiler somewhere. This is a great tool to be able to tie in with that. And yeah, those are the 3 main ways we feel that you're going to really apply what the leadership tool is to make some real changes. The final 2 points is important to flag up is that the tool, because it's so comprehensive, there's going to be an awful lot within the report itself. It's going to be there as a sort of personal sort of reference point all the time. So again, we're talking about using the tool in your file and for the leader to keep referring back to that and everything like that. So that's important. And then finally, appraisals and PDPs. Leaders need to be appraised. Leaders need to go through these performance track conversations, and this tool is a great way for a leader of leaders to assess the capability and performance of their people. And that's so that what I was keen to do is just really show you, put that slide as a sort of starting point. Again, it's relatively obvious, but I still think it's important to sort of flag that up. Let me just stop for 1 second. So there's any question here. You mentioned some of the rate of feedback might be sensitive for the leader. You give a flavour of the type. Yeah, really good question. Is it all right if we come back to this, because I think some of the subsequent slides will touch on this a little bit more. But in essence, what we're asking, well, I'll cover it later on. I don't want to give the game away too much. So when we're looking at the profiler, this is the fundamental difference between StrengthscopeLeader and Strengthscope Standard. And if you think about it, it's this wheel. So anyone who's read Stretch will know all about this wheel. So this is our the framework around leadership development that we've developed that enables us to harness what the strengths are and actually cascade that through to some end results. So if we look at that circle, it sums everything up. So at the center, the core of that circle, we've got the how bit, what your strengths are. So how you lead is, and what's specific to you as an individual is what strengths you have. So in that sense, in the core of that circle is Strengthscope. And what that is we will understand through a series of questions what your strengths are. What are the 7 key strengths that you possess, and also potentially what areas are you not so motivated by. If you look at this next slide, I'll show you, give you a little bit more information on that. So this is the beginning of StrengthscopeLeader. So the first almost third of the profiler is exactly the same as Strengthscope Standard. You will understand what strengths that leader possesses. As you can see on this sort of example slide, this leader here has got some really low non-strengths in the emotional area, but you can see some of the strengths here in the execution and thinking and relational sector. So you'll understand what those 7 strengths are. There's a great stat around this, which is that the probability, these are unique to you as an individual, that leader, so the probability of getting the same 7 as anyone else in any order is 1 in 346,000. It's a great stat, but what we're actually talking about is that those 7 strengths are really specific to you. And really unique to what you are. So if you can understand what they are, it's going to give something that's going to be really intertwined with you. We're not just putting you in a broad brushstroke box like some of the profilers might be able to do. And then, we're able to sort of understand what that is through developing skills and agility and areas of natural strength. So this is, again, something that's natural and intrinsic to you as an individual. So we're able to develop and develop you as a person through a real focus on what those strengths are. Gives you a great sort of frame of reference when putting action plans and behavioural strategies together because you know the kind of stuff that you're more likely to be excited doing, and you know the stuff that you're not going to be so excited doing. You may always think that you know that in yourself, but to have that on paper is great. Now that's the sort of the base of everything we do. If you see on the bottom here, though, on this screen, there's I think Danielle calls this your strength signature. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my word for it.
Yeah, I quite like that name. So if you see at the bottom there, so you can see a kind of plotted graph about where you are. And again, if you're looking at the quadrants as well, you can see where the real area of focus for this individual is. And that's unique to StrengthscopeLeader. But really, this is in essence the same as Strengthscope standard. This is a self-assessment. This is what this individual deems are their unique strengths after completing a series of questions through the psychometric test that we give them. And there's some really great stats around reliability and retest reliability that we're really proud of, and that runs through StrengthscopeLeader as it does with Strengthscope Standard. But that's the base of the tool. And again, anyone who's done Strengthscope at this point will be like, there's nothing new, this is exactly the same. And you're right, it is exactly the same. So part one, the what part, Strengthscope Standard, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. So then we go on to the how part of this, which is the next little band in that circle. So we're talking about behaviours and habits here. So how a leader is performing against 4 key leadership habit areas. So that's building on the what bit, and we're not just looking at what energizes you, we're looking at how often are you demonstrating the key behaviours and habits that a successful leader or a strength-based leader will exude. And we do this by, again, the 360 elements. So how effective you are, again, you're going to self-rate that, but the most important aspect of this area is how your peers and how your nominees feel you're performing in these 4 areas. So the 4 key areas that we've got are showing vision, sparkling engagement. I quite like sparkling engagement as well. But sparking engagement, skillfully executing, and sustaining progress. So those are 4 behaviours that we want to see our leaders showing. And again, there's some real great synergies between those and some unique strengths. As you can see on this wheel here, it's another wheel for you to digest. But you can see in each of those four key behaviours, you see which is the blue dot is how you're performing yourself, but the purple triangle is an average score from all the raters. Mm-hmm. And again, there's some real, and you know, when we were talking about what hard-hitting feedback are you potentially going to get, this is when you're starting to sense some potentially challenging conversations, because if you're feeling you're really performing at where you want to be, but you've had I don't destroy the bottle. But if you're seeing that on average across the 18 raters that you have, they rate you much lower, you've got some soul searching and some exploration to do at that point. And again, that's why it's really important to have a consultant or somebody who, again, is able to be almost like a neutral voice to help that leader explore these concepts. So that's the kind of behavioural part, and that's the second part. What's really exciting about this, and I love this part, is that we go into an awful lot of detail on this. So if you have someone who's like, well, what do you mean I'm only this? Let's analyse it a little bit closer. So there's 4 items per behaviour as part of the psychometric, and the profile will show you where you rate yourself against each item, and also where your raters rate yourself on each item. So if we look here on sharing vision, this particular individual rates himself very highly, that he's able to inspire others with a simple, energizing and realistic vision of what success could look like. However, his raters don't seem to be quite on the same page. So we'd be able to sort of analyze that on an item by item level. But even beyond that, there's some detailed 360 analysis per psychometric item. So we've even got to be able to go beyond that and look at who has said what. So this is the true 360 element of the tool. You're able to understand what's the average across a group. So if you've got 10 people within your group who are your direct reports and 1 manager, you'd want to know what those different communities think about this this thing, and the tool will be able to do that as well. See that here, he self-rated him as 5 out of 5, but his manager sitting superior has rated him 3 out of 5. That's something that I'd want to understand a little bit more about. Anything you want to say here, Danielle? Or?
Yeah, I can just add just more from a technical perspective. So the categories that are listed there in Patrick's example are the categories of nominees that you will see in StrengthsCope. So it's manager, superior, direct report, peer. Other than obviously it's got your self-rating as well. There is an anonymity aspect to this. So if there is less than one individual in the peer or other category, they can select to go into the other category, sorry, into the direct report in the peer category, can go into the other category. It is something that they decide on when they are filling out the questionnaire. So it's just another aspect, but obviously, you want to have transparent feedback, so it's up to them.
A lot of this will be around how you frame those nominees' responses. So again, we'll be there to support you how you go about asking for that feedback from the nominees, because the nominees need to know why they're being asked this and what it's likely to do, because you want to make sure that you're getting as detailed and as true feedback as possible, because that's really where this can either be really, really strong, but or potentially fall down. So again, we'll support you with that as well. But what I was just keen to do there is just show the level of detail the tool is able to give you around the answers that the people are providing and the nominees are providing. Hence why, when we talked about it earlier, there isn't really an option for you to self-assess this, because the value of your own perception about how good you are at creating a vision in others, how interesting is that compared to what others view you as a leader. So that's the behaviours part. So that's the second part of the tool. So that's all brand new to anyone who's used to using Strengthscope and Strengthscope 360. So this is unique to StrengthscopeLeader, and this is, again, really, really exciting. Beyond that as well, so we don't just look at, sorry, let's just stop that for a second. Patrick's asked another question. If the number of raters for a group is 2 or less, is this anonymized?
So it's not for all groups, the anonymity. It's only for the peer and the direct report, but it's for them to choose if there's 2 or less in that group. Otherwise, it automatically just goes into their category.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes sense. But yeah, we can pick this up in terms of the nominees aspect. For me, the way to deal with that is how you framing it with them, and then we can support you with that as well. So the third aspect of the leader's effectiveness is the outcomes. So again, we don't just stop and understand, how effective a leader is at demonstrating the key behaviours. We talk about, well, how effective is he at delivering the outcomes that we need, and those outcomes are, again, there's 4 of them, which again is nice and consistent. But the 4 outcomes that we're talking about is purpose, passion, process, and performance. And P's on St. Patrick's Day there is brilliant. So they're the 4 outcomes that we're looking at. And again, we ask the leader how effective he feels he is, but we also then ask how the nominees feel that individual is at delivering these outcomes. And again, when you're talking about hard-hitting feedback, if your people are not rating you very highly in these areas, that's going to be challenging for anyone to hear. And that's kind of fundamentally what it is. And let's just stop there 1 second. Bridget. Oh, yeah. So here, this is a coaching question. So Bridget's asking, I love the graphics and the detail and the feedback, how clear it is. I would be concerned that a leader would just focus on the gaps, i.e. the weaknesses. How is that balance with building on the obvious strengths, or does this all happen in the debrief questions? Yeah, so this is the potential risk you've got with a tool like StrengthscopeLeader, because it's so comprehensive, because it's going to provide some really challenging insights to an individual's performance within the role. It's not just what they think, it's what the people that matters most to them think. Mm-hmm. You're going to have some real, and again, if someone doesn't, if you're not debriefing a report like this effectively on the most practical and professional way, you get that risk that people will just go, oh God, why are people saying this about me? and it becomes they feel a bit kind of persecuted. So that's why it's the quality and the strength of the person either giving the one-on-one feedback or how it's framed in a wider development piece is where you're going to sort of avoid that. And again, we can help you with how you actually do that, because that's a development conversation, that's a coaching conversation, that's a application conversation. But it's true, it's a really important point, and we're seeing that already, because this is going to give some really, really hard-hitting stuff. If it's not framed properly, it could potentially be quite damaging to that individual's confidence, and especially because in part 2, in the how bit that we've just covered, there will be verbatim feedback as well. So there'll be some actual personal comments and feedback from those individuals. And if you've got 18 nominees, all of whom are able to tell you about how you can potentially improve in a certain area, it's going to, if you don't have thick skin, it's going to be quite challenging. So Anne's asked, will James be addressing the coaching piece? Potentially a little bit in terms of his feedback, but that for me is a wider development conversation about how you interpret a tool like this. And we've got training courses and support that we can provide to really help you go into that debrief session completely confident that you're going to be able to deal with these challenges. Actually, that's the question. Would it be possible to have a sample or an example or sample report? Very much so. Everybody on this session will get a sample report following the end of the webinar, and we'll also potentially give you the opportunity to try it out yourself if that's something that you find valuable. We're a little bit behind, so I'm going to just plow on for now, if that's okay. So that's kind of the tool in itself. It finishes, the report culminates with 360 analysis for leadership effectiveness, so there's a kind of encapsulating question, which again is something that potentially will move over time. So this is different to your strengths, but your rate is evaluated on your effectiveness in delivering strong positive leadership to the organisation, and you'll get a position, so you get an average position on a scale of 1 to 10, and it's really important that we've also got the lowest rating and the highest rating as well. So you can see, you know, if your average is at 6, but you've got a really low score of 1, there are some people in your community who really don't believe in you. Or in this case, if it's all quite close, you're quite consistent with the appreciation of what you're doing, and again, that's in itself something worth exploring. So that very much is a high-level overview of what the tool is. Again, we'll go into more detail with James's debrief webinar and also the one-on-one conversations that we'll potentially have following the session. So again, there's more to that. So again, beyond the actual psychometric element of that, there's an awful lot of resource that you're going to have within the report. So again, you know, we mentioned earlier that this is potentially a resource that you can have on your desk. There's some really great insights about how you can develop certain key behaviours, and some great insights that are actually included in the tool themselves, and also obviously the verbatim comments. Yeah, so that is that. We talked, again, we've covered a lot of this, so I'm going to fly through this relatively quickly. But the applications of StrengthscopeLeader, we touched on the debrief session. So again, if you're completely new to that, we do have training workshops that can get you accredited in the Strengthscope suite of tools. And then we're going to give you some really great support so that you're able to do this yourself or upskill your team to do this. Second of all, there's coaching. So if you're looking to really explore the strengths-based approach within your people, we're able to offer one-on-one coaching programs where one of our consultants will work directly with a leader to understand their profile and start really building on how they can actually develop themselves to get into that great place of someone who's truly embracing their strengths and building on that. Third point is to incorporate this into a leadership development program is a really great way of getting this messaging and this out across a big community very quickly. The messaging around that is get in touch with us. We can really help you integrate this approach to what you're doing already, and we've got some great consultants who are able to do that. And then finally, we talk about team building. So again, if you're looking to create an away day for a management or exec team, this is a great tool to be able to use at the base of that. So that's really it. Again, we'll speak about this in our one-on-one conversations following the session, but that's really the applications part of the webinar. And conscious, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I'm going to sort of just fly through the resources that we've got available to you. I mentioned the Stretch book. So Stretch is a book that's been written by James and Paul, who are co-founders of the Strengths Partnership, but will develop the suite of tools. And that's a great book if you're looking to really understand the kind of the theory and the frame behind it. It's a great book to be able to read. So get in touch with me about that. Anyone who's done accreditation will probably get that as a special gift as well. So don't worry too much. There's some great tools in the resource area in terms of how you can use the tool like StrengthscopeLeader and actually apply it to specific situations. And again, that's all in the resource area. We'll make sure that you're aware of that. I've touched on the overview from James. That will be available for you over the next week or so, and I'll get that across to you as soon as it's released. There's a great two-page flyer that a lot of you will have seen, which really does kind of introduce the concept of StrengthscopeLeader and talks about the value. So if you're looking at marketing that to your clients or internally within your business, I'll get that across to you, and that's a great resource to support what you're doing. We've updated the user guide so you can see how you actually go about physically administering the tool, and again, that's all updated, and Danielle's done a great job there. And there's also an FAQ document finally. So again, a lot of the questions that you'll either have asked here, I've got some really good answers, but even those big questions that you haven't asked, that you'll think of in an hour's time, hopefully some of them will be covered in there as well. So I'll get that across to you all as well. Sample reports, again, we've already covered that, so hopefully that's not too bad. And there's also a free feedback questionnaire. So it's a really good thing if you're about to do a debrief for someone on StrengthscopeLeader, there's a pre-written set of questions that we really want that person to think about and answer after completing Leader before receiving their feedback. And that's a really good thing for you to have. And then finally, we've got a great animation that I'd love to be able to play you right now, but we're running out of time. But I'll send you the link of that, and that's a really great resource for you to introduce the tool itself. Yeah, and we've talked about training. So again, if you're looking to potentially upskill yourself, there's the accreditation workshop, which will ultimately get you to the point where you're able to administer the tool. And then beyond that, we've got some great applications masterclasses. If you see the bottom three there, they're all the ones that are specifically focused to StrengthscopeLeader, which are the Engaging Performance Conversations, Strengths Accelerator, and Strengths Coaching for Results. Those three courses are specifically aimed at people going through Leader. And that is everything from me. One thing I really want to stress, we're going to send you an evaluation questionnaire following the session. It would mean a lot to me if you could all complete that so we can get a real grip understanding of what you think about the session, what you need from us, and everything like that. Other than that, that's it. Again, I'm happy to stay for a few minutes if we want to cover off some of those questions that I know Michelle and the guys have had. But other than that, 1 o'clock exactly by my watch. I think I've managed to get that in well. Brilliant. Thanks, Liz. I'll see you later on, yeah? So I'm going to stop recording now.